Hi, this is John Rosenhead, the Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post for Sukkos is titled The Seven Ages of Man. Because this week on Shabbos we're going to read the Megillah of Koheles. And one of the reasons given for this is that now we're in the time of Zman Simchasenu in Sukkos, we're at the height of our happiness following the Yom Neroim, and we can get carried away by the pleasures and the joy of this time, and in a sense we can just get lost in the materialistic pleasures of life. And the message given to us is that we should focus on what is important, what is meaningful, what gives significance and direction to our life, and not get swayed by the hevel havalim, the futility of life. And the Medrash in Koheles conveys this idea and says that the 7 times that Shlomo Melech says hevel havalim relates to the 7 stages, the 7 periods in a person's life. When a child and a baby is 1 year old, they are like a king, they are hugged and they are kissed. But then when they are 2 or 3 years old, they're like a pig putting their hand into the rubbish. When they are 10 years old, they are like a goat jumping around. And when they are 20 years old, they're like a horse, beautifying themselves and looking and going out and searching for a spouse to get married. When they are a little bit older, the next stage is when they are married. They're like a donkey. After that, the next stage when they have children, they're like a dog going out to find food and bread to bring home. And the final stage, where they're in old age, they're like a monkey. And the Medrash is trying to give over this message that we can see that life can be so base, it can be such a basic, simple level, an animalistic level, a futile existence. But the Medrash ends off and says if a person has Torah, if they live a Torah life, then even in old age they can be a king. Because the Pasuk says, V'amelech David Zaken, that even when David was in old age, he was an old person, he was still a king. And this means that a life of Torah still will ensure that the person reaches this final stage and can still have this level of being a king. So let's look at this from a psychological point of view and try to see what message we can take out for Sukkos. Because psychology, and theorists in psychology, like models, they like to come up with stages and they like to be able to map out and be able to present theories in a visualistic way, in a systematic way. So too, in lifespan development, that looks at the person's development, there are a number of models that looks at a person's development. There's Erikson's 7 stages, also 7 stages like the Medrash, 7 stages of psychosocial development. There's Freud's theory, there's cognitive development of Piaget, and we see all these different models that try to map out a person's development and try to see how a person's development interacts with their development, psychosocial development, their cognitive development, which helps us to be able to understand how a person develops, what is healthy functioning, what is healthy development, and also from a therapeutic point of view, we can try to see how we look at the life cycle and we try to see how what the stage that the person is at, how each stage there is we can see that perhaps there's a certain challenge associated with that stage, and therefore we can model and tailor psychological interventions for that stage in the person in the life cycle. For example, in early child development, when we look at concepts of abandonment or neglect, it looks at attachment theory. In the teenage years, there's a focus on self-actualization, self-identity, independence, and self-confidence. And in old age, when we're looking at a person's deterioration in their functioning, and they have to focus on ideas of reliance on other people, and the end of their life, and death, and dying, and mourning, these are theories that come up at this stage in life. So lifespan development and the developments and having a model that looks at stages helps in terms of understanding a person's development and also informs therapeutic interventions. So with psychology and with the message of Koheles, we can look at a person's development on a continuum, where the person can develop successfully or perhaps not successfully, unsuccessfully. And it depends, do they live a life which is futile or do they live a life which is meaningful? But how do we do this? How do we ensure that we move towards the end of the spectrum, which is healthy development, successful functioning, and a healthy and successful and happy life? So Rav Shlomo Wolbe, in his Sefer Alei Shor, looks at this Medrash in Koheles, and he points out and says that, as we said, when a child is 1 year old, they are like a king. And a life of Torah, as we said, means that even in old age, you're like a king. So we see there's a commonality, there's a theme that goes through, a single value that you can start life as a king, end life as a king, but it means that a person has to be committed to this value. They have to acknowledge it, realize it, understand it, and remain loyal and committed to it, and they're not swayed by things that makes them turn away from this quality, this royal kingly quality that they were born with. Because often people can be distracted, as we said, with the futility of life or the materialistic pleasures, and this can, in a sense, corrupt their personality and can sway them from the direction they were taking, that they are not able to maintain this value of being like a king. So the message of Shlomo Volbe is saying is that a person needs to understand, and through the Torah, they're able to understand who they are. They're able to understand and recognize their qualities, their individual uniqueness, and to remain committed and loyal to this value, to understand what they stand for in life, to appreciate their values and the meaning of life. And through this, they can remain committed and start life as a king and end life as a king. And I think this is the message now for Sukkos, as we've gone through this period of Yom Noraim, that we don't want to just look at the 7 ages of life, like Shakespeare says, is that we are just actors, we're all players, there are entrances and there are exits. Life doesn't have to be futile. Rather, life can be meaningful. We just need to know how to maintain this quality, how to be a director of our existence, to write our own script. And this is given through by the Torah. The direction is given through the Torah. And it's interesting, when we do teshuvah, we've been through this process of teshuvah. The Rambam writes that when a person does teshuvah, they become a new person. And the Darchei Moshe discusses why there's a minhag to go to the mikveh before Yom Kippur. And he says it's because the person, it becomes like a ger, like a new person. Just like a ger needs to do tevilah, needs to go to the mikveh because they become a new person when they become Jewish, so too when a person does teshuvah, they become a new person. And they need to go to the mikveh. And the commonality between a ger and a baal teshuvah, someone that does teshuvah, is they are like a new person, a katan shenolad dami. That's in the halachic sense. They are like a newborn child. So this is what teshuvah is. It's to go back. It's to go back to this initial stage when we were 1 year old. To go back to this stage of being like a newborn baby. To reconnect with this value and this focus of being like a king. That even if we got swayed and we went off in different directions, the message of teshuvah is to go back. Teshuvah literally means to go back. Go back to this first stage, being reborn, to become a new person again, like a baby, to be a king and remain committed to this, that we can end our life as a king as well. Chag Sameach, have a great Shabbos and keep well.